Well, Caroline, we've had some fun conversations, we've had some funny chats, and today we're going to get a little bit more serious for our audience. But I think it's a very important topic that unfortunately does not get discussed enough, and that is grief in the workplace. And a lot of companies have employee assistance programs, but that's only part of this conversation. And this is going to be really enlightening, and I think our audience is going to nod along as they hear our guest today speak.
Definitely. We're bringing in one of our very own Benefits Alliance member advisors, leaders, Shannon McShane-Reed, and we're bringing in Justin Clifford from Bereave. We've seen both of these folks on stage, but here's what I know. If you get it right, then you will keep employees. You will have immediately an environment that can deal with something that we will all go through, and that is the loss of a loved one, and that's grief. Get it wrong, you risk losing at least half of the people that have gone through grief while working for you. So I think this is something employers you've got to tune into. Let's bring them in and start the conversation. So big warm welcome to both Justin Clifford from Bereave and Shannon McShane-Reed from Penmore, part of a Benefits Alliance advisor who is a member of Benefits Alliance. Let's start off by just simply introducing each other. So Justin, if you can tell us who you are and a little bit about Bereave.
Yeah, thanks. My name is Justin Clifford. I work at a company called Bereave. My title is CEO. We work to help companies and individuals navigate death at home and at work.
Okay, I'm Shannon McShane-Reed. Like you said, I'm from Penmore, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Domestic Benefits and part of the Benefits Alliance Group.
Excellent. Welcome. Well, Shannon, we've invited you and Justin into this podcast as both Rob and I have witnessed you on stage at our past conferences, and there's just no better way to help describe the support and what employers should be looking at when it comes to grief. And so my first question to you, Shannon, is if you wouldn't mind sharing your story and what you want to this audience to learn in terms of messaging from your...
Yeah, so maybe to tell you a little bit background. So I lost my 17-year-old son, Ethan, in 2019. And I had gone through other things. I lost my mom when I was young and my brother in my early 30s, and then recently lost my husband 3 years ago. So had different experiences, was working through all of those in my 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, and had different work experiences. And before Penmore, I never had support through those experiences. So one of the things that was important to me was, one, I think it's very important that plan sponsors understand the difference between grief and depression. Not the same thing at all. That's where EAPs kind of go into play, where when it's grief, you're not depressed, you're in shock mode. So that was kind of the thing with Penmore. And I say this not in a positive way, that I was blessed to have somebody who had been through the experience. My boss had lost both his parents, so kind of was like, whatever you need. Like, you don't need to rush back. It's not this 5-day return to work kind of thing. You can work from home. So that was kind of the thing, is like, it really is like it's not the first 7 days, you don't even remember, especially when it's a traumatic loss or and I don't say it has to be a child. It's everybody's relationship with a person is different. Whoever is that primary person in your life, when that happens to you, you're just like out to lunch. So having something, I wanted to make sure that employers are aware that your employees they're not back on a Monday and they're the same person. They're a totally new employee you've got.
Well, thank you, first of all, Shannon, for finding the courage and for having the passion to come and share your story first and foremost. We so appreciate that. And it really has turned into something that you can help us on this journey. And that's why we're here today, everyone. We're going to dive into your experience, navigate and learn with Justin and Rob and I to understand what employers can really do in this time. Because let's face it, all of us will face death in some capacity, usually while working. And so everyone can learn from this episode, and we really appreciate you taking this journey with us.
Yeah.
So
Very well said, Caroline, and I couldn't agree with her any more than how she phrased it, Shannon. So we really appreciate you telling the story, and especially being a true champion in an area that, frankly, has been ignored in a lot of corporate benefit plans. Or as benefit advisors, we get approached around sometimes some strategies and what are other companies doing. So Justin, maybe give us a background of, Bereave, where Bereave kind of the idea came from. How did you really first realize that how important the workplace is to support employees during these times?
Of course, the concept of bereave is born out of experience, like most companies around grief or loss or death. Two of our co-founders actually lost parents prematurely. Elijah lost both of his parents before he graduated college, and Matt lost his mom in early 2020. And in going through those experiences with their and having their friendship throughout, going through those experiences and talking about how it not only just, I don't know, it just sucks to lose people that you love, but the system that wraps around you that you get kind of dumped into is antiquated and unhelpful and often just perpetuates the pain instead of helping alleviate it. And the conversation started coming like, hey, this process and these things that we need to do and all the learning that has to take place, it seems to be a lot of it is controllable when you move to the logistical side, right? And the thought around how lacking technology was around that experience and how everybody has to learn for the first time in a way that really just is difficult to navigate. And we thought that there's an opportunity to change the way we experience the loss of our loved ones. And so we went out and started having a ton of conversations, and it was this wild moment. And I don't remember how many conversations in we were, but a lot of people heard what we were up to. They started raising their hands. They started saying, we want to tell you about our person and our experience. And when we started listening to all of these people who were so generously and vulnerably sharing their stories with us, and a lot of times as strangers, two things were very clear. One, people didn't know where to turn when they suffered a loss. And they always said, we didn't know where to turn, so we did X. And the second thing that was completely unexpected, because we knew the first part because Matt and Elijah had experienced something similar, so it wasn't a huge surprise. But the big surprise to us was that in probably 90% of these conversations, people started talking about their employer or their work experience or their manager. They would go from talking about their loved one to something about work. And then they would continue with the story. And it was always this really, almost awkward point where kind of as somebody who's interviewing these people to some degree on trying to solve this problem, I had to come back and say, hey, why are you talking about work right now? And it turns out that work experience, the manager experience, the way an employer or any part of that, whether it's the policy, the leave, that piece not only plays a massive role in the employee experience, but it also plays an incredibly significant role in the grieving journey. And those two pieces, when we started really diving in, we started to connect those dots. We went and started talking to a ton of HR people that we knew. We started asking them what they did. We started talking to managers. What do you do when you have a teammate suffer a loss? And all of them just kind of gave a collective shrug. And so we started asking different questions and came up with Bereave as a solution for employers and their employees.
Oh, that's great. And you can imagine those stories are one of two ways, right? People are going to say, my employer was fantastic, as Shannon had just indicated. Or on the flip side, like it wasn't her previously, it was the opposite end of that scale. It was like, no, I wasn't supported at all. And I can say it. Listen, I lost my dad 2 weeks before my first daughter was born. It was a very tumultuous time, and I didn't even, my dad's funeral ended, and it was like the next day I was getting a phone call saying, "Hey, I need you in this meeting." And I was like, right? And I had a lot of four-letter words that flew out of my mouth and that led me to I need to go look at other options. And I was just trying to navigate everything and just try to keep my head above water. And I was open. I struggled for a few years because I couldn't grieve. So the importance of allowing someone to take that time, I think, is so critical. Justin, we were chatting beforehand. So kind of given when an employee is going through like a grief situation after a death, What does that actually look like day to day inside a company now in your eyes, now that you've been doing this for a while?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things because you mentioned time there, and time can be a critical piece to this puzzle. It often is a critical piece. Some people want to go back right away. Some people need days, weeks, months, even at times. Some people need time later on, right?
Mhm.
And I think when we think about somebody dies and we have an employee who has suffered this loss, the first thing that we go to is time. What does the policy say? How do we give them some space? How do we get them back? How do we help them be productive? And it's the kind of the state of bereavement at work is really all about time. That's a big piece to the puzzle, but it's only one piece to the puzzle. And when you start to dig in and start to hear about what people would have wanted, would have needed, what they got and they appreciated, like Shannon mentions, right? When you start to have those conversations, you understand it comes more to an educated management team, educated managers, and nobody has to become a grief counselor, but you have to understand like baseline foundational, like what to say, what not to say, what does grief feel like if you've never been through it? What are the symptoms, right? The physical, the mental, the emotional, all of those things are a big piece to that. And if you have an uninformed management layer and you have an uninformed HR or people team layer, you're going to default to time. And a lot of times you're defaulting to a set amount of time that was determined probably several years ago based on bloodline that just isn't adequate for what somebody actually needs. And that's where the experience starts to crumble. When you have somebody inside of an organization that is grieving, you have to understand all of the things that they are going through. And the best way to do that, A, is to be informed, but also to talk to people who have been through it so that you understand the complications that come up from being able to pay attention, being able to work with people in a meeting, all of the logistical components and logistical matters that are probably bogging down productivity. And I think the number one thing, and this is going to probably sound counter to a lot of people's perspective of death at work, I think the number one thing that I really encourage people to think about is how it impacts your P&L. You don't have to be human about this. You don't have to be empathetic. All of those things help and they will greatly assist in the experience. But if at the very least, if you don't have a human heart, at the very least, you understand how it can impact productivity, how it can impact retention, and how grief can ultimately hurt your P&L if you let it. And if you at least start there, you will start to act because you've got a layer of grieving teammates and it hurts productivity for a lot of reasons. It hurts retention for a lot of reasons. And if you don't understand that, you really don't have the foundation to step up and make the experience better.
Rob just said it there before, is like, as soon as that happened, I gotta look somewhere else. Like, that's what I'd say in speaking with hundreds of parents who have gone through the same thing as me. If they did not have an employer who supported them, they were gone. So when you're talking about that, that's just a case. If they don't feel like they can be themselves, they're gonna get out of there and pretend to be somebody new, or because then you're not resentful because they don't know. But if people are going or walking around like they know, but they're not, like, we're not talking about it, like, that's something I refuse to not talk about my son and them. I just, that's, people ask me how many kids I have. I'm always going to say two. That's just, to me, it's too painful not to. But, that's exactly what you said. It's like people will leave your company if you don't show them the support they deserve.
And
Well said.
Shannon, I'm going to dive in a little bit more because I think I've learned so much from you and from Justin from past conversations. And I think one of the biggest things I learned is that, yeah, there isn't a recipe for how everyone will react. And as Justin alluded to, some people are like, I need work. I need work as a
Mhm.
distraction. I need routine. And then maybe 3 months later, you need something different. So for you, what could you share about the best way to have that conversation with Leo, your employer, and what he did in return for you in those early days, because you wouldn't even know what you need or want at the time, but
Mhm.
what were some things that you appreciated in the words, in the questions, and in the support right in those early days following the loss of Ethan and also your husband as well?
Yeah, so I think it starts with a culture, I'm going to say, because it's not like if you didn't have a culture that kind of spoke about these things before they happened, I knew that he had lost family. I knew that our HR had lost her mother. We're just kind of an open group about those kinds of things. It's not taboo to talk about those things there. But if you're starting, I think it's, important to say, well, these are the policies we have, but, we're going to be there and talk to you each in your own scenarios. Like what I needed the week after my husband Steve died or uh, is different from what I need today to what, because I can tell you, like I've had this conversation with Leo, is like my morning every morning starts with I wake up and the first thing I realize when I wake up and open my eyes, and sorry if I get emotional, but it's like my husband's not there. I walk down the hallway, Ethan's room is empty, and that is where my morning starts every single day, and it will be for the rest of my life. So it's like I kind of say, I am not the person who wants a 9 a.m. full force meeting. If at all possible, start me later because it's not that I'm not there and I'm not present, but it takes a good few hours every morning. I have to get up extra early so that I can just kind of be like, okay, let me deal with my grief. I'm going to put it in a box for now. But that's the kind of things like I think those are the things. And one of the other things he offered me, and sorry if I sound like I'm jumping, it's just he said to me, if you're not ready to be client facing, that's okay. If you want to do all the back end work, and then I'll present the renewals for you. Like that was just kind of one of the things that he did for me, and I'll do all the client. And when you're ready, you can come back. And just having somebody be like, okay, that pressure to be is just not there, and you can be here as much as you need to be. Or I know I told my team, like when they've had recent losses, it's like, look, if you need to go out and you need to take your lunch at 2 or you need to go out, you don't have to ask me, just go. I get where you're at. Like it's just that I think it's just being compassionate and being having constant check-ins with people of just like, is there anything more that you need this week? Is there anything we need to pull back on? Just having open conversation.
Yeah, that's great, Shannon, and to be that proactive and at the same time open with your team and allowing them that it's okay to be open about how they're feeling or if they're having tough days or as you
Mhm.
said, just you want to start your day just a little later. It's not because you don't care. It means now you're ready, and then that's great. It's great to have such an employer, as you said, that has really got your back and you've got your team's back. I think
Mhm.
we appreciate you sharing that because that's important. That's really important, as you said.
I
You
also
know,
think it's sorry, I was gonna say it's also important for the people who are not like me, who are very closed off and don't wanna talk about things. That doesn't mean they don't wanna talk about it either. So those are the people sometimes that you like if my other son, he's very like, don't ask like not he's not gonna ever want attention. Not that I want attention, but I'm just saying he grieves differently than I grieve, right? We all do. But he needs somebody to still check in. So you always can't what you see is always what you get. Put it that way.
very true. Very true.
Justin, when you were talking about, and I know it sounds, on the surface kind of cold when we look at profit and loss, and consider this, but I think it's important for people to understand that, yes, there's an EAP, all of these things that could be in place, but what does it actually really cost a company, both financially and culturally, when they would ignore what an employee is going through? Let's
Yeah.
hear about that.
I can talk about grief specifically, but I think when culturally, when you ignore people's lives, your culture is going to be hurt. It's not just grief. You could go to a manager and say, hey, this thing just happened. And if they don't show up in the way you need them to show up, and if the company won't support you, even if the manager is not, you're probably going to start looking for something new. You have the opportunity in crisis situations to show your true colors. And sometimes it's not even opportunity, it's happening. Your true colors will be on display in the moments of crisis, right? And so even though Bereave looks at this from the lens of loss and grief, this is a very holistic type of cultural decision that leaders need to make on how in depth they are going to support their employees. And that goes to things like manager training and manager readiness and preparedness. Very specifically around grief, there is a Bereave poll that we ran I think last year maybe. And we asked one simple question, which was on LinkedIn. And so this is relatively unscientific, but it's crazy how many often this number comes back around to show probably pretty accurate. But we asked one question in this poll is if you've suffered a close loss, however you define close, if you've suffered a close loss, did you leave your employer within 12 months? 500 people replied to this poll. 51% of them left their employer. Okay. So when you think about how expensive it is to lose an employee, some estimates will say half of an annual salary up to 2 times an annual salary, depending on the role. When you think about how expensive that is versus just putting a plan in place, giving some light training, doing an ongoing, training reminder for managers every year, a pretty inexpensive investment to ultimately work to retain a significant amount of your workforce who might suffer a loss, and that's just from a retention perspective. And when you think about it from a productivity perspective, the number just grows, right? You're talking about absenteeism, you're talking about presenteeism, you're talking about people who have told us time and time again that they have just stared at their computer screen for days on end because they physically couldn't do anything. And nobody was checking in on them on what accommodations might need to be made or how much extra time they might need or support in logistics that they could need. When you have those things, even though your employees might not need them, they see who you are as an employer, and it's a great opportunity to really show up.
So if I'm a CEO or a people leader and I'm listening to this right now, when I hear 51% for something that, is companies can integrate quickly into their processes, that's got my attention. So, Justin, you know, how could a company or how should a company assess, are they equipped to handle something like grief right now in their organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two conversations that need to be had with multiple people. The first one is going to the HR team and saying, "Hey, go back and pull everybody from, I don't know, say 2025 right now, right? If people are listening now, go back and pull everyone that we know coded bereavement in our systems or we know suffered the loss of a loved one. Pick 5 people and go talk to them, right? The next conversation after an HR conversation is go talk to the people that lost a loved one and go specifically to them and say, how did we do? That's the only question you need to ask. And you just sit back and you listen. What I have been so shocked by is that people like Shannon are so willing to tell you what you did well and what you didn't do. We think people are just going to shut down and not talk because this is a sad thing. In actuality, there are so many people out there, Shannon being one of the top people probably in the world that advocates for employers to think about this. Is if you go have that conversation, you're going to learn so much about your company culture, right? And you don't need to just know about the processes. You're starting to understand the culture, right? Who actually are we? I'm not talking about words on the careers page, that's advocating to come work here because we're so wonderful. They all look the same, by the way. You can go look at any careers page, go look at 10. They all look the same. They all sound the same. But what you actually do in those moments are going to be huge. So if that CEO wants to do that, she can go have those conversations, turn around and go back to the HR team and say, hey, here's where we're great. Here's where we suck. Here's how we move this forward. And that usually is the stopping point because nobody really knows how to do it. Right. So that's where companies like ours or calling folks that are well versed in grief or certified grief counselors, like they might be able to help support. There are companies and there are people that have become experts in this. When you want to make a change, you can make a change because you do it with marketing, you do it with product, you do it with innovation, you do it with all of those things. You can also do it with this topic as well.
Come back to Shannon too and hear about what was that impact to you when you hear about how you're making a difference and not just within your company, but actually, it's gotten so much bigger, which is a real testament and legacy to you working with, Steve, Ethan. It's carrying along your experience to clients, to within Benefits Alliance. You were the mental health and wellness chair. We took this on as a topic that was so important. So tell us about what that means to you, and having that message carry forward and to help the future yous that this happens to.
Yeah, it's a bit overwhelming to hear what he said because honestly, I don't in any way see myself in this. I made a commitment when my son passed away that he was more than the day he died and that I would make sure that he lived on, and I didn't know how. So in multiple ways, but I think this was more a coping mechanism for me because I've always kind of been an authentic person. And when my mom and brother died, I was pretty good at I grew up in the era, I think a lot of us did, of like work stays outside the door. As soon as you walk in, it leaves, right? But when Ethan passed away, that was like it's just not possible. You're not going to survive if you aren't able to be authentic. 'Cause you're either gonna go into drugs and alcohol or whatever's gonna like, you just have to deal with the pain in one way or the other. I'm very honored that, I get this space to do that, and if it helps anybody else if it normalizes grief for people, it's so weird to me to even say that because everybody grieves. It's the only one thing we all have in common, and I think one of the important things that if I'm talking to a CEO or CFO or HR, it's like we used to get it we used to be able to get away with that, but this generation coming up, they've lived through COVID, and I will guarantee you that every single person between 20 and 29, even younger, have lost one of their friends or know one of their friends who has, died by suicide. It's a fact. It's the number one and I don't wanna get into that whole discussion, but the point is that you didn't think that younger people were dealing with grief, it was more like you dealt with it, but they're all dealing with grief, and they have higher expectations out of work than ever before, and they won't tolerate it, and if you don't handle it properly, they're gonna be gone really fast, so I think from a like, that goes back to retention, I'm hoping it's coming from a place of compassion more and caring about your people. But if that, they're all dealing with a lot of stuff that they shouldn't have to at the ages that they're dealing with.
Good. I want to take one more point that I remember hearing from you, Shannon, in that there were some very practical tips. Like, we'll talk about programming in a moment, but for you going through what you did, I remember you giving us language and even tips about using, Ethan and Steve's names and
Yes.
telling your colleagues and your manager, like, here's what I need from you. And
Yeah.
if you could share that, I found that so powerful.
Yeah, so there's a few things was like instead of saying, what can we if somebody passes away and you say like and you don't know, the first thing you could ask them is what was their name? Can you tell me a little bit about them? What was your favorite thing about them? And even saying to them, what do you miss most about them? Or like you think they're gonna upset them, but if you don't think that every minute of every day, I still think of Ethan, like his pictures here, he's always there. It's not gonna upset me. It might come out visually like that, but it actually brings me joy because they stay alive, and that's what anybody who's grieving the only thing the reason you're grieving is because you miss and that's why we talk about depression versus, grief versus depression is grief is the loss of that person and wanting to be with that person. And if you get to carry them with you, the grief goes lighter. And that's a lot of the issues with work is that when you go into that space, if you can't carry those people with you there, like I could go in and say, how are your kids doing? How are this? And I remember even bringing in a picture of my family and being like, oh, okay, I should probably take this photo down because two of the people in my family are no longer living. And, people said to me, are you kidding? They're your family. Why would you take it down? And that just was like a big hug to me. Like, that's the environment you want to thrive for. So, yeah, just things like don't be afraid. I say to people, think, what would you want them to say to you? And that's what you do. Because, you don't need to just be real.
So, yeah, and you know what? There is a ton of listeners right now, including all of us on this virtual podcast as we record this, nodding our head because we could not agree with you more, Shannon. I think of the questions that people, I wanted them to ask those questions, and they felt, and I was a lot younger when my dad passed, so I think it was just people were uncomfortable. Friends who had not lost dads or parents yet, so it was
But
they didn't
even
know what
Rob,
to
what is your
say.
dad's name?
Blair, yeah. So his
Thank you.
name's Blair. So I talked about him. Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. So my daughter, who was born 2 weeks later, her name's Emily Blair. So we've kept on the tradition of his name all the way through.
Lovely.
So it's just fun.
Yeah.
So it's fun, even though because we talk about him a lot. That she'll now she's turning 18, and she's like, Years ago, she used to say, "No, I met Papa Blair," and it was cute because we talked
Yeah.
about him so much that she assumed that she had met him, which was great. How has it helped you talking to companies then that might have they don't know where to start then? They want to look outside, as Justin talked about, time. What are some of the conversations now that you're having with employers, Shannon?
So, yeah, I find that when I have the conversation, it's like, Justin, it's in crisis time sometimes, right? Like something's happened. What do we do? You know, I have the conversations with them too of just be like, okay, you don't need to fix anything right now. Just be there for the person. Yeah, I'll tell you, anything you're gonna tell the employee right now, they're not gonna remember any of it anyway. Tell them to just, right now, focus on your family. When you're ready, not next Monday, when you're ready, I'll check in with you next week, but you contact me and I will help you out. So it's the thing of giving them supports and saying, again, I'm a big believer in Bereave, and I know we're working on getting it in Canada. Cannot wait till that happens. But, that's the gap right now is how do we fill that in Canada and get that instant resource when somebody calls?
Yeah, and Shannon, if I can just tack onto that too. I mean, there is there is the concept inside of bereave, but there's also the concept just in general that you have to wait until somebody dies to do something.
Right.
A big part of bereave is the and any program that's going to think through things like mental health, think through things like grief, think through things like just people's lives in general is thinking proactively. And so getting managers some baseline training, huge step forward, so they know what to say, or they have at least practiced it in the past, and they understand that they need to stop and pause and listen or try to figure out what to say, right? And to make sure that there is a framework and or a playbook or a roadmap or whatever you want to call it, something somebody turns to in that moment of crisis where they know what to do, so they aren't calling us. And I mean, we got a call 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago now. Company had 4 people in an international office out celebrating, and there was an accident, and 2 of those employees were in critical condition, and 2 of them had passed, and they called us, and we could help to some degree, but now we're already playing from behind. If they had the frameworks, if they had a plan, just like they might any other contingency plan, what happens when the leads dry up? What do you do, right? There's usually a plan for that. Having a plan for these situations can really help support a whole host of folks in that moment of crisis. And thinking through that with employers who say, hey, we want to do something, we know we can do better, we just don't know how. The fact that they're raising their hands is a huge signal to the opportunity for them to get better.
So there's just two things I want to add on. I know we're going to be at time. So two quick things is one, proactivity. And I encourage, like they said, go out, ask your employees what they did and own it. If you didn't do it right, own it because those people are holding grudges. Right? So, and you don't have to be all that. Just say, we've realized we've done this. We're going to do better. That alone will heal a lot of people. And two is be very cognizant around holidays and your employees. It's great that you have a Merry Christmas and you have Happy Mother's Day, but there's people who don't have their mothers this year. There's people who don't have their fathers. There's a lot of inclusive things out there that will say Happy Mother's Day to those who have, can't have a child or lost a child or, is an adoptive parent. It's like, we talk a lot about inclusivity, but it's like you have to realize how painful it is for a person to see that if they had just lost somebody. There's different, I'm not saying don't celebrate because you have to look for joy. Believe me, that's what keeps me going. But also, it can be very, if they put something out like that, a person is going to be really hurt and they'll feel not seen. And that can encourage them to leave your company.
And I was just gonna say that's as simple as managers, and I can talk about how we've built this into our product all day long, but it really is as simple as when you hear about somebody who has suffered something at some point, putting in a reminder on your calendar, right? Put a reminder in 60 days out and go check on them. Put it 180 days out. Put it 350 days out so you're ready for that 1-year anniversary that's coming up to go check in on them. Put a note in for Father's Day, the Mother's Day, the birthdays, the anniversaries, the holidays, all of those things to go acknowledge the fact that they are walking into a holiday that they are used to celebrating that is going to be different this year. That's all you have to do. It's maybe 6 calendar entries, and that alone, from all of the people that have told us what meant something to them, it's to Shannon's point. It's people that walked up 6 months later and said, hey, I know this Father's Day is going to suck for you, or this one's going to be different, or hey, I know this is probably on your mind, right? There's no perfect way to say it, but the fact that you're acknowledging it and allowing space for somebody to talk about it truly can make a world of difference to that person in that moment. And when you talk about building loyalty, when you talk about building a culture, when you talk about those types of things, it's got to be built on the action like that.
And the grief we don't know about. People who've had miscarriages or, fertility didn't go well. There's a lot of that kind of stuff that people don't. But if they still need to feel included in their grief.
Yeah. Grief, you don't put grief's not in a box, right? Because grief means different things to different people. So this might be a great segue. Justin, tell us about the platform that you and your partner build so that the audience gets an idea of what does Bereave do for companies, give them that framework.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking. So a big piece to this puzzle is making sure that, again, we build that support system around people. So there's really 2 sides to the platform. There's the side to the employees where we can give them and their families opportunities to be proactive, things like documenting your wishes and sharing your wishes in advance, but also giving people playbooks to understand what to do when they encounter a loss. The other side of that is very similar to for HR teams, giving them a playbook of considerations, right? This isn't a checklist. You're not going to do the same thing for everybody that suffers a loss. Life and loss are too different and too individualized and too unique. But there is a list of considerations around things like Shannon mentioned with accommodations. There is one accommodation listed in our platform that specifically says maybe this person who is client facing shouldn't be client facing for a while. Go check and make that suggestion or make that accommodation if they want it. But thinking through all of the things to do, whether an employee loses a loved one or an employee dies, they're 2 completely different paths. And we give companies the framework to be able to follow so that they are prepared in those crisis moments.
What a great way to wrap up the episode. I think this touches everyone. And I think as a final question, I'll say to Shannon, is there anything else, if you could take one thing out of this episode in this conversation and it was speaking to an HR leader or executive, what's your simple piece of advice at the very basis of everything?
I think it would just to reiterate that, you've probably gone through it too. And how would you have wanted to be treated? And it's that thing of, most of us know what the right thing is to do. If you just be real and, honest with yourself, you know what you need. Even if that's like, I don't want to talk about it, but you still know, even for people who don't want to talk about it, they still need something. So I would just say anything that you're going to do is better than what you're probably doing now. Any change is good. Be real and compassionate, right? Authentic is the
Taking
word. Yeah.
Yeah. No, well, this is great. We appreciate your openness and vulnerability. And as I said, death and taxes are what's guaranteed in life. And knowing that there's organizations out there and champions like you too, Shannon, that are educating companies to know that, hey, doing something, as you said, is better than nothing. And I think this has been very enlightening. It's a hard conversation and a hard topic, but it's also one that can be really empowering for an organization's culture at the same time, right? That to know that we just to tell employees, we got you in a time when and you need it more than ever. So we really appreciate you both coming on today, sharing stories, talking about the platform, Bereave, Justin, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for doing it.
This has been the Benefits Alliance Voice. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your network and be sure to check out the podcast notes for any additional materials.